Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. It's day 3, Business Continuity Awareness Week 2024. Talking once again with Jason Haas. Jason, we had a great first segment talking about community resilience on a micro approach level. Now let's switch that up a bit and talk about community resilience on a macro approach level.
Right. And so in thinking about micro and then of course macro, which we're going to talk about. So we define micro as your neighborhood, the community immediately around where you live. So when we think of macro, or at least when I think of macro, I shouldn't define it for everyone. I need to define it for myself and how I see it, is think of maybe your city or town or community at large. So in thinking about that is, my view of what macro would be is, all right, what are we going to do about macro community resilience? What could we do to enable it as resilience professionals? So one, collaboration, multi-stakeholder collaboration. Oh boy, there we go with those BC terms.
Yep.
So breaking that down is engaging stakeholders such as government agencies, businesses, maybe nonprofits, community groups, in resilience planning and decision-making processes. Again, this is probably more of a volunteer effort. Maybe not. That's for you to figure out and decide. But in thinking of it for me in my community, so I live in Jefferson County, Colorado, and where I live is really close to the emergency large animal evacuation points. So in thinking about that, how could I, as a resilience professional, help with emergency planning and resilience planning? What happens when we have that loss of sight due to wildfire or other, regional impacts and things like that? How can I help the city planners and other stakeholders or nonprofits? Because there's also a humane society by it as well. How could I use the tools and knowledge that I have to enable them to thrive during those adverse times? And, it all starts by engaging them. Have a conversation. What's the worst you're going to hear? No, thanks. Okay, well, no is actually where the conversation starts, because if everyone says yes, it's not a conversation, it's an agreement to go do something.
Yeah.
No is your opportunity to work that elevator pitch, to lean in more. Okay, you don't want my help, which is fine. How else could I help? Maybe there's other ways that they could leverage you or use your skill set. So that multi-stakeholder collaboration is go out there and ask those, agencies, whether they're government or not for profit or federal or local or state or whatever, see how you might be able to help them. Volunteer.
Yeah, and a lot of those agencies, they're open to people to help them because when situations happen, they always find themselves spread thin. And because that's always a complaint that we, the general public, always have. And it doesn't matter where you are. There's not enough. It's not happening fast enough. Well, be a part of the solution, not the problem. Step up, engage with the police or fire or first responders in general, whatever it may be, and offer your help because a lot of them, there are things in place to train the public, to help them out, and it's like when you're in the office and you walk around and there's a fire hat on somebody's desk or something like that. There are programs like that for the general public as well. So
Right.
look
And
for them.
yeah, and FEMA, US based, is always looking for volunteers, whether it's part of exercise coordination as they look for victims, so to speak, because that helps in training. You got to make it realistic, or maybe they're looking for, a volunteer that can respond during those times of crisis and help organize that chaos. So volunteerism is really big. Granted, there's no money in volunteerism, so you got to think about, again, your personal risks and your personal approach to things. Maybe that fits in what you're trying to do, maybe it doesn't, but just think that help that you could offer could really make the difference between your community just surviving or maybe thriving. Just imagine that whole thriving thing and what that might look like during an adverse situation when the community all comes together to rise through that adversity, to work through whatever that is. Loss of homes. I think of the Marshall Fire in Colorado here, which was a devastating wildfire. The community supports that came in, offer of homes for people to stay, extra rooms, donations of clothes. Some people lost everything. Probably a lot of people lost everything. Think of newborns are going to need clothes, are going to need formula, they're going to need diapers. And if you've been hit by a tragic, natural disaster like that, chances are you might be financially constrained to do anything because everything that you had is gone, and insurance doesn't move quick. So what do you need to do to survive and thrive in those conditions? You rely on your community, you rely on those stakeholders to volunteer and step up and to do things. And maybe you're that volunteer one time, and maybe next time you're the recipient of that. So
Yeah.
consider that. It's a karma play too. What comes around goes around.
Yeah, I can't help but think of the 9/11 disasters in Gander, Newfoundland, where all the airplanes, the airspace for the US was closed. So they had a lot of planes landing in on the east coast of Canada and Toronto, Montreal, but it just tons of them in Halifax and St. John, Newfoundland, and Gander, Newfoundland, and other places along the coast there. And they were relying on the local communities to help. And the local community was so close knit already, they were able to offer up homes to, thousands of complete strangers coming over from who knows where, basically the rest of the world, and had them stay at their house, cooked them dinners, had parties. And there's, a play about it, a musical, From Far Away, I think it's called. There's been books written about it. There were weddings, people met and got married, and that's because the community was so close, they just stepped up and helped. And it's amazing. It's a fantastic thing. I wish the whole world could do something like that.
I agree. We'd be so much better off for it. And what's interesting as we talk about micro and macro resilience, from a community perspective, is the whole key is community, a sense of community, people bonding together for a common good and common goal to create a better outcome.
Yeah.
Just imagine if that was practiced in every city, every state, just everywhere. Chances are we'd be in a better position than we are today.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case, and people are going to do what people are going to do. So, we've talked about around that community-wide, regional-wide collaboration, but also let's think about inclusive planning. So develop and implement community resilient plans that prioritize equity and inclusion. Depending on where you live and what those demographics look like, you may have disadvantaged populations, whatever that may be. They may need additional systems of support. So think about that. How can we lean in and support those disadvantaged communities even more? I look at myself and things as like I've had my own adversity, but I understand I'm also doing this from a pulpit of privilege.
Mm.
Things could always be so much worse, and I'm so thankful for what I have and what's enabled me. But not everyone has that same opportunity. And when adversity strikes those disadvantaged populations more, we need to lean in more and offer different supports. Thinking of COVID and public education. So that's where I got my official roots in business continuity, was during COVID in public education. I worked for a very large school district. That time was 89,000 students, 14,000 staff across almost 800 square miles. And when we pivot, which in 2 days we pivoted to remote learning, which luckily our district was really smart in their technology plans. Pretty much all staff already had laptops, all students had Chromebooks. But the one thing that kind of punched us in the face was internet access. Not everyone prioritizes internet access as a must-have. It's expensive. And if you're in a disadvantaged population where you have to make the choice between food on the table, bills paid to get your lights on and things like that, or internet access, I know where my choice would be. It would always be the things that support my family. So we had reports of kids sitting in front of closed restaurants, getting open Wi-Fi, or, pods of kids and families joining together to share an internet connection and things like that, which in the pandemic wasn't necessarily the best state, because at that time, the information we had, those populations were more at risk due to the close contact.
Yeah.
So luckily our district was super smart and very agile. Great leadership in the school district. They used the lunch program, free and reduced lunch, to qualify families for who got free hotspots or maybe discounted internet through a partner affiliation with Xfinity. Xfinity actually can do great things when needed. So, when you think of Comcast, like, it's not all bad. Sometimes they do the right thing. And kudos to them for doing that. So we partnered with, local charities and other sources to get equity to internet access out to families as quickly as we could. And, because it's not right for a child to sit in front of a Taco Bell that's closed on a sidewalk trying to learn. You think that's okay? You okay with your children doing that? I'm not with mine. They deserve better. And this is our
Yeah,
future. So we have to make sure we're investing correctly. So that's that, inclusive planning is think about those disadvantaged populations and how can we support them better during adverse times.
I take that a little further, and I'll do a shout out here to Justin Murhoff, talking about accessibility, who really promotes accessibility. Is some of these groups that you just mentioned, go and ask them, what would you expect? What would you need? How can we help you? And they could even be one of your neighbors. It doesn't have to be, far away or somewhere else, but bring them into the picture as well. These populations that, or groups of people that are disadvantaged or something. Well, someone with accessibility issues may be disadvantaged as well. They could be deaf, they could be blind. Um, well, there's just so many. I'm not going to
Right. You
point
name it,
any
the
out, but
impact is real.
yeah, but find out, how can we help you? I'm asking the police or the fire department, how can I help you when something happens? Well, let's not assume this is what we're going to do for these people. When X situation occurs, then this charity or this building, a lot of people with sight issues live there. This is what we're going to do. Well, maybe that doesn't work for them. Go ask. Go find out. That could be some of your volunteering as well. Create a plan for them as well and help. And it's like, wow, yeah, you're meeting our needs. This is the way it would really work. This is what we expect. So reach out to that. So shout out to Justin Murhoff who taught me all of
Right. And just think all this starts
that.
with collaboration. We're simply
Yeah.
asking questions. Communication. It's amazing what communication can do. We can actually understand each other's needs. And if we even need anything, maybe as we reached out to those different, impacted communities, maybe they've got it.
Yeah.
Great. We won't know until we start asking.
And they're going kind of like what we said in the first segment. They're going to teach you some new things too,
Right.
because they will probably, whatever group it is you're working with or talking to, are going to identify things you had as an assumption, and they're going to
Right.
prove that your assumptions were wrong.
Right. And just think about how you could apply that then to your actual day job. As a resilience professional or continuity professional, whatever, nomenclature you want to put on this, just think by being informed from a community perspective, what that might do to inform your organization and its people. Amazing things could happen.
Yes, I agree. So what other things can we think
Right.
about here?
We've got community-wide type collaboration, inclusive planning, considering that. I have one on here called community-based risk assessment. And, I'm going to kind of pivot on that. I'm going to call BS on myself. You know what? Doing a risk assessment on your community, and you bring that to a board meeting or something like that, they're going to go tell you to pound sand. That's just not going to work that way. So I'm going to change up the idea on my note on this. Show up to those meetings anyways. Don't necessarily come there as a know-it-all saying, oh, you got this risk, this water tank's unprotected or whatever. Ask them to demonstrate their preparedness based on what you know of the risks of the area. You're a professional. Chances are, you might work in the area and you might have done your own risk assessment for your organization and you kind of understand maybe some area-based risks or region-based risks. Ask your local government to prove that they're competent in that. Not necessarily be vitriol and challenge them, but saying, hey, to me, I work in a regulated environment. So if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. Show me your response plan to a wildfire. Show me your response plan to an all hazards approach. Show me this. These aren't, sensitive private documents per se. These are community documents
Yeah,
supporting community-based services. We should be able to get eyes on them, maybe in a redacted form, but we should be able to get eyes on them, prove that they exist. When's the last time they were tested? When's the last time they were exercised? What are those results? Think of it like almost third-party resilience planning. No different. You're
yeah.
asking your local government to prove that they're competent. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't.
I can already hear a bunch of people who just heard you say that already have that answer to that question going through their head. Prove that they're competent. I just know what they're saying right now. But
Yeah. There is there's a challenge with competency in politics. It's oil and water for sure. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't try or at least do our due diligence in proving that those plans exist and that our community is prepared.
well, I know a lot of them do because one of the first shows, first season or second season, I interviewed someone from the fire department here in Guelph. And they were telling me about some of the fire plans and emergency management plans they had. And they said they're all on the city website. He goes, you can go and see them, and that actually circles back to the very first thing we said in the first segment about home plans and things like that. They said, we have all of that in there. You can have a look and see what's going on. It's not just when there's a fire, turn on the hose and here comes the fire truck, that it's so much more than that. These
Right.
plans are there. He goes, and if you have questions or things, that you're not sure of, reach out. He goes, that's why there's a contact information in there. So sometimes people forget that, like you say, these plans are there. We can ask questions about them.
Right. It's like, I dare you to identify your community emergency planner and build a relationship with them. And then think about how they might help your organization. Again, thinking of that area that it may be in. How can they assist you during those crises, those regional, maybe natural disasters or other type of impacts? How can you coordinate and collaborate? Can your organization maybe assist them? And in return, you might get some assistance from there, or some glean into processes or training or who knows. But, there might be an opportunity to build that relationship and then hopefully maximize it.
Yeah. And you're going to learn a few things too. And with any luck, maybe improve those plans too, or
Right.
become a part of them.
Right. And in thinking of things like you had mentioned around the fire departments having, plans, and a lot of this is published, well, they probably also have plans for and templates for your own personal,
Mhm.
going back
Yes.
to that micro. What are the things to consider? I'm not an emergency planner. I can make educated guesses, but I guarantee you I'm going to get some things wrong.
Yeah.
Also in thinking of emergency services too, consider a strategy of when they don't show up. It's plausible. What if it's a massive, again, going back to the Marshall wildfire in Colorado, do you think I could have called a fire department that day out of a close, non-impacted area and expected a response?
Yeah.
No. They're all going to be deployed to fight that effort. So if I had a home fire that day, I might have had, more a longer response time, maybe if one at all. I'm assuming that there would have been some sort of response, not something I plan on ever testing or finding out, but still, something significant happens in the region, you may not have emergency services. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do to self-support?
That reminds me of Katrina back in 2005. If I got the year right, 2005 for Katrina.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. With a lot of the emergency services, there was complaints, the police weren't there or the paramedics weren't there. There were instances where they were stuck and couldn't get out to help anybody. Their own homes all of a sudden were washed away, or they're holding on to their family, in the water. It's like I can't let them go and go save someone else. I'm trying to save my own people here. They were stuck and impacted by the disaster as well. So, to your point, sometimes you do have to think about that. What if that help isn't there? And then you can
Right.
look at other ways. Hey, learn CPR, learn an
Yeah.
evacuation route. Set up a Google alerts or local radio stations or something that announces things. Start listening to it or get an alert when something comes out, so that you can be more proactive rather than, oh, it's flooding. Why
Right.
didn't I know?
And, I'm guilty of throwing a side eye on occasion at doomsday preppers going, here comes the tinfoil hat thing, but they're not necessarily wrong. Creating food stores and things like that in case supply chains are disrupted. Think of going back to, again, COVID. It's what I know. The whole toilet paper, madness around it. Good Lord. A doomsday prepper was well prepared with that. Not only did they have input covered, but they had output covered in how to take care of it. So something to consider that, well, we may, I may throw a side eye sometimes at doomsday preppers. They're not necessarily wrong. Take what makes sense to you from that and build upon it.
Yeah, we're not saying, you have to learn how to build a lean-to or something in the middle of the forest,
Right.
or set traps to catch a beaver or something like that. Not that, but some logical preparation steps on your own end to protect yourself.
Right.
And you can teach that to others so that your wider community becomes, like we're talking about, more resilient, more
Right.
open. We share. I remember where I used to live. Well, it used to be called Midtown in Toronto, but now it's kind of part of downtown because Toronto's grown so big. But the Yonge and Eglinton area, when the power outage went out in 2003 on the East Coast, and all our neighbors, none of us had power. All our ice cream was melting, all our steaks and burgers were thawing. So we had big community parties. We shared, and we all got to know each other after that.
Right. It can lead to really some positive outcomes. Um, Also, in thinking about macro resilience, I have strengthening community networks. And that, for the most part, means just participate in those community networks, whether it's in their social media channels, be positive. We want to be an enabler, not a disabler there, growth mindset, not that inner critic. Um, but also, consider those volunteering efforts and community engagement. Help them where you can, leverage that skill set that you have. And again, we're better together. We fail as individuals, but as a group, we have a better chance at success sometimes, especially during these large regional impacts. So something to consider about that is participate in building those community networks,
Yeah.
capacity building for local organizations, especially the ones that work on volunteerism. Man, they need all the help they can get, whether it's in donations, your resources and things like that. Consider those volunteering efforts. It will pay you back tenfold. And I know we could go on and on with this. There's so many things that we can do, but pretty much just look at what your profession is right now that you do for your day job and see how you can use that skill set to protect your family, your neighbors, and your community at large.
Yes. I think that's a great place to end. I'm not going to add anything to that. That's a great way to end our segment today. Thanks, Jason, once again, talking about community resilience and being part of Business Continuity Awareness Week for 2024. I really appreciate you sharing your time and your thoughts today.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate this opportunity to share my perspective. Hope people have found value in this. Thank you again.
And everyone watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.